possibly. But no, it is, I'm not using the daemon in that terminology at all. It is purely and simply the ancient Greek term. I did debate whether that was the right term to use, but I feel it is because it is accurate and it's the term that's been used since the 2nd century BC.
And you've just basically brought a kind of scientific discipline to looking at it. And
I do stress to people when they come across my ideas, it is simply a hypothesis, in the sense that I've read up a considerable amount and I've drawn the information together and come up with something that seems to make sense. What I'm not advocating is the answer. That's for other people to decide. And I'm hoping that given time, I may be able to test out some of these things scientifically and actually do some scientific research on it, in which case it will then become a theory. But in effect, that's why I have a forum, that's why I have a website. I want people involved. I want people to criticise. If there are things in my theory, in my hypothesis that you disagree with or you have a problem with, let me know. You know, I haven't got the answers.
I've got to say, I do have one I suppose it's a question really. If we're living the same life over and over, you know, then we're all living in this century, aren't we? Well, the end of the 20th and the start of the 21st. So everybody is stuck.
Yes.
In this century. That means there was no 18th century or 17th century, because they must be living, well, I suppose there could be. So are you saying...
It still existed.
So they're still living their lives in the 17th century. So Joan of Arc is still fighting the English in the whatever century she was in.
But this does come back to the idea,
16th?
doesn't it, that as one philosopher once said, time is just a way of stopping everything happening at once. And the idea that if time is an illusion, and we're all living in the ever-present now, as the Buddhists would say, you know, everything is happening concurrently.
But if that's the case, what if I don't want to be in the 21st century? What if I want to be in the 25th century, where you can have, you know, flying cars or something?
I don't know. That's one of the things that I've made this point. I made the point on the forum today when somebody was asking a not dissimilar question. Is that, and I don't consider myself to be Einstein or anything like it, so please don't think I mean this, but I'm just using it as an example, is that when Einstein came across relativity, all he was doing was putting together the information and saying, if you put this together in this way, this seems to be what is happening.
Based on observation, which is what you've done.
Yes. He didn't invent relativity. And relativity was already out there. All he did was he observed it, saw it, and decided upon it. That then... There was lots
like
of
Darwin didn't invent evolution. It was
exactly, it was already there.
Yeah.
So the same thing occurs with Einstein, and suddenly, you know, from there you get atomic physics and you get the atomic bomb and the nuclear bomb in Hiroshima. He would not have wanted that to happen, but he didn't make that happen. My books, I've not sat back and thought, this is what I'd like to believe, and I now will create a book to prove my ideas. It didn't happen that way. I use the analogy, it's like Friedrich Schliemann, the guy that found Troy. Friedrich Schliemann...
Oh, that's right, because they said it was a myth, didn't they?
Yeah. But what Schliemann did was, he just had an instinct, and he started digging in a hill in northeastern Turkey, northwestern Turkey, the hill of Hissarlik. And he just started digging, and he started finding things. And I felt, when I was writing the book, that's what I was doing. You know, things would just happen. I'd find bits of information. Well, it was almost like a jigsaw puzzle, and I was finding it piece by piece, and the bits just started to fit. Now, but I didn't create the jigsaw puzzle, so there's lots of questions I even have about it.
One thing we didn't talk about, which I thought was really fascinating, was this thing, the people who have near-death experiences, your explanation for that was that people who have their lives flash past them in a hurry, it's the daemon who's perhaps a bit of a novice daemon, and correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah, that's good.
Running your life again a bit too soon, because you're only near death, you're not actually dying, and although your time is slowing, it hasn't stopped in that sense that you can live your life again, and it goes, oh shit, and it has to run the tape to the end, so you get your whole life like that, and then it goes, oh, but you're not ready for that yet.
Yes, and it goes, literally that is what I mean...
Oh, did I use that rude word? I'm sorry.
You did, whoa, after the watershed. But yes, so I think what happens is that you get to the point of death, or a near-death experience, and suddenly the daemon splits away from the eidolon, goes, oh, what am I supposed to do? And next the daemon goes, oh, what am I going to do? Dresses up as something, comes, Elvis Presley. as the being of light. It's really true. You know, their pet dog. You know, so and it just comes along. Hey, hound dog. You know, you're not dead yet, and putting his quiff together. But in all seriousness, that seems to be the case, and the daemon just panics. But the point is, after that near-death experience, people always say, because I'm a member of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, and if you look at the literature and you look at the experiences, after they've had that experience, they become far more spiritual, far more aware. They see links in things. And it's because the daemon is aware now.
So are you saying that the only people who have near-death experiences that are like that are people who've, first-time visitors, if you like?
Yeah, yes, I probably would say. It's an interesting question which I've never thought of before. But yes, probably they are virgin lifers that have the past life review. Because effectively, the next time around, the daemon is self-aware and therefore is ready for the circumstances, and he's sitting there going, right, I don't need to push the fast forward button because I remember last time they crashed here.
Okay.
But most daemons, if they're worth their salt, will go, they were going to crash here, bang, bang, don't do it this time.
Don't do it this time.
Get off the road.
I've got two really good texts in here. This is from Chaz. How does a medium's daemon know about my life?
Because if the... It's an interesting one in that the daemon, A, could be telepathic, which is going down a whole different route.
Are we talking daemon to daemon here?
Yeah.
So my daemon is probably having a separate conversation with your daemon?
We don't know. This is one of the areas we're looking at the moment. And it's an area, again, I'd rather not go down the route of until we've done a little bit more work on this. This is where collapsing the consciousness wave, that Carl's theory works on, is the idea of communications and the idea that there is a sort of field of communication out there that you can tap into. But effectively, there could be an argument to say that the daemon probably, the medium's daemon, probably remembers the encounter last time where they didn't get the full information. And this time round do, because maybe subsequently in a previous life, that daemon got to know him, or that person got to know him, and the daemon remembers from last time eliciting this information. It's a possibility. I also would argue that a lot of, having witnessed a lot of work that mediums do, mediums are very good cold readers, and they are very, very good at doing that, of eliciting body language, asking very, very open questions to elicit more information which they fire back at people. Now, I'm not saying that all do it, but many, many do. So you need to just be very, very careful about that. The mediums I know say they have an ability and a power which they can't control. They can't do it like that.
But also, isn't it the case that if, for instance, you are, I don't know, say somebody's doing tarot cards for you, if they say this card means this and this card means that, then somehow it's you that knows whether this is right for you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Isn't that more the case?
Yeah, it's all, you're right.
It may be whether it's your daemon or the eidolon, as you call it.
Well, of course, because all these forms of divination are exactly that, aren't they? You know, from the tarot cards to the I Ching and everything else. It's very much you seeing the symbolism and interpreting the symbolism, as indeed we do with our dreams. You know, I think the I Ching is probably the best example of that.
Yeah,
of how we...
yarrow stalks, isn't it?
The yarrow stalks and these ambiguous statements and the hexagrams.
Because the ambiguity gives you the opportunity then to interpret it.
To interpret it. And if
your
daemon
can, like, intercede, if you like. Okay, let's move on. We've got 12 minutes left. This is a good one. Bob from Huntingdon just wants to know, are we dead now and just reliving it as we speak?
We haven't got to the point of death.
And we never will?
No, well, it's not we never will. That's another big debate we have as to whether there will be, ultimately, you'll run out of... Well,
like an evolution of some kind, like mankind evolution. Yeah. We evolve into a different,
That's what would be great, would be the idea. Rather like Phil Connors is allowed to move on by whoever controls the day after day in Groundhog Day, something stimulated in the story for him to be allowed to move on.
Well, he did evolve, didn't he? He evolved into the really nice Phil Connors.
Yes, and then he
who could play the piano and fix people's cars and ice sculpt a beautiful sculpture and not be sickly around the...
It was as if he'd reached nirvana. He'd become a pure human being, or what I would say, he'd become a unified daemon and eidolon, and he was allowed to move on. Because in most esoteric belief systems, the whole point of esoteric study is to bring together, you know, his life and everything was nonsense. But if you look at my theory, there are similarities. So clearly there is something that we evolve, in which case we live our lives many, many times, and then we move on. But in far as my theory is concerned, you have to understand that my theory works within the brain processing consciousness. Now, whether consciousness is part of the brain or not, I personally believe it's greater than that.